That'd be great.
So we are talking today with somebody who I have great affinity for. And if you're in the Taekwondo world in the United States, I am certain that you are familiar with. That is Dave Young. And Dave, I'd like to welcome you. I
Oh,
became
thanks for having
familiar
me.
with Dave. There was a tremendous buzz about Dave's work with Taekwondo schools, and the American Submarine Association had highly recommended him. Probably before 2016, I took my first session. Dave's been a huge supporter of Taekwondo Life Magazine. He's a regular contributor. We'll talk a little bit about his background. I have from last month's issue of Taekwondo Life Magazine, this cover, Dave's article, How to Evaluate a Self-Defense Program. Dave is the author of a terrific book, How to Defend Your Family and Home, which is available in any platform that you can get books, including Amazon. And Dave is really a very well-respected guy with a great pedigree, and probably one of the most, and I've been in and around martial arts and self-defense. I've taken everything from my regular training to courses and seminars my entire adult life. And I would say that Dave's training and program was the most beneficial, most practical, and valuable things I've ever experienced. And I really appreciate that. Dave is going to be featured. Our digital version of the special Dave Young issue was released on July 4th, which I thought was appropriate. And the print issue will be following shortly hereafter. You can check out our website for more information. So with that long introduction, which is not even long enough to describe all of your credentials and pedigree, I want to welcome Dave Young to the program. Hi, Dave.
Oh, hello, Mark. Thanks for having me. You guys put on a wonderful publication. I read some of the articles from a lot of the other contributors, and they definitely are passionate about Taekwondo, and your magazine serves a great service for the community.
Thank you. And I want to say, not because you're with us, but one of the things is that you sort of set the tone from early on, in that we focused on the fact that we've always talked about the fact that we would have substantive content, that it wouldn't merely be an article that was an advertisement for various dojangs around the country or various masters. We wanted to provide content that was either Taekwondo based, or that Taekwondo practitioners, masters, and instructors would benefit from. And that has been the nature of your content. So tell us a little bit about Dave. Tell us about your background for those that aren't initiated in in Dave Young. Tell us about who you are and a little bit about your background, and then I'd like to know, explain to folks what your relationship is to Taekwondo.
Sure. I'm married. My wife and I have raised 5 boys and a girl, and as a result of that, we have 7 grandchildren. So
Wow.
we're pretty blessed on that front. And everything they say about being a grandparent is true. My background in my career started out differently. I could have definitely went many different avenues in my life. I started out in the street as a kid in a gang. I was shot once and stabbed once before I was 14. Dad left when I was born. The same trouble most single mothers have, trying to balance jobs and food and school and clothing. And, we went from apartment building to apartment building as a kid. And, I got to see a lot of different things about life at a young age, and it made me appreciate a lot of the things I have now. And that got me first involved in trying to keep yourself safe. I took a variety of martial arts, through my career, nothing really formally. I haven't really obtained a belt structure, as you would say. But I've surrounded myself with some outstanding people. I started out catching shoplifters in Inglewood, Watson, Compton in the early 80s. I got a scholarship to play water polo out there. And, then in my career, I started out as a corrections officer first, then a police officer. And then I spent 10 years of active duty in the Marine Corps, 6 years in the reserves, and I've served several deployments, during that time. And
Where did you grow up? Did you grow up on the West Coast?
I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I was born in Brooklyn, New York,
Oh,
but I
wow.
grew up in Hialeah, Florida.
Okay.
So we went from one extreme of a culture diversity down there to our high school went from, I think, 83% Caucasian when the Marilita boat lifts came in from Cuba to about 13 to 15% Caucasian. So it was definitely, you had to learn how to get along with people in general, because, people either live in one or two worlds. They either live in the world that it won't happen to me, so they do whatever they want. They think they're ready for what is not going to happen, or they're going to be ready when it does. And everyone, I think, starts out in the first world. It won't happen to me. You know, I'm kind, I'm courteous, I'm respectful. And sometimes that doesn't translate well to the people that you're dealing with. And, you know, everything starts off in a verbal context. It escalates to where you either have to exit or remove yourself or disengage from that contact, avoid it, escape it, or you're going to have to engage it. And at a very young age, I learned engagement strategies. You know, they could be fast and furious and very dangerous. And the person that you're up against for self-defense doesn't have to be skillful. Just sometimes has to get to something that you don't see coming. And I think that's where a lot of self-defense programs are a little amiss, but all the trainers in the country have the same goal, to keep their students safe. And as we started developing our programs, you know, we spent a majority of our life teaching military, police, security, corrections, all kinds of law enforcement organizations, state and federal, to include all your branches of the U.S. Armed Forces. And about 7 years ago, after talking with Master Chan Lee, he asked me a question. I really couldn't give him an answer. You know, why don't you teach civilians? And there really wasn't an answer for that.
Sure.
Except, you know, you want to screen the people you train. You want to make sure you're offering them credible information, because, you know, as an instructor, when you sign that certificate, you're either signing that person's death certificate and they don't know it, or you're signing their insurance policy and you're increasing their deductible. And I think you have to take great responsibility before you speak. A lot of trainers teach as they were taught, which doesn't really connect with a lot of people. So there was a lot of scientific evidence that helped us really design the programs that we have and that make it real. You know, you could teach things that only you can do, which leaves a very small group of people that can actually learn it. But you have to teach things that cover the entire context of self-defense. What happens before? What do you do during? What do you do after? And then how do you report it to the police? Because there isn't a physical confrontation you're going to get into here in the United States that the person that loses won't report it to the police.
Sure.
Whether they start the fight or not, you know. So, you know, I'm on the road, or before COVID hit, I was on the road 45 weeks a year. We travel around the country providing our programs. We teach predominantly instructor courses. And that model had worked really well, because now we're able to teach instructor certification courses for martial arts school owners, and they can continue to teach our programs in their local community, which has been great. I have a whole newfound respect for school owners, you know, seeing a lot what they have to do on the back end.
Sure.
Most students just see a clean dojan, you know, instructors ready to go, but there's a lot of moving parts. And just to see that gives me a deeper appreciation for everyone.
Well, that's great. That's great. Now, I know from taking your one of your courses that it is very hands-on approach. It was very intense. It was really interactive. How has that approach changed in terms of in light of the fact that there's been this changing dynamic since March of people having to go from in-person to online? Has it impacted what you're doing? Have you just taken some time off? I know better. Or how have you shifted your model to be able to effectively deliver what it is that you do without being, you know, face to face with somebody?
Well, you know, I want to start off with a quote, and the quote's from my mentor and one of my closest friends. Gary Klugowitz says, you have to do fire drills instead of fire talks. So whether you're in the classroom, students don't want to hear you talking. Whether you're on a remote training, they don't want to see you talking. And that you're only going to really remember what you do when your life depends on it the most. So you have to kind of change the format. So we use a pretty simple delivery system. First, we show the student what we're doing so they can take that brain picture. This is what it's supposed to look like. Because let's face it, everyone, myself included, when we go to a class, we bring our own experiences with us. And sometimes that experience, if it's not put in your back pocket, can really hinder learning. So we want to make sure we take that brain picture. Now, if you're on the opposite end of the spectrum and you've never been in a fight before, you're not too, you know, your physical agility isn't of those people who play sports on a regular basis, then you still have to have that brain picture. So we show it to them. Whether you're on a screen, you're watching a video, or we do it live for them, but we show it. they have to have that brain picture. And after you show it to them, that only gets a few of the learners. You know, your visual learners see exactly what they're doing, but the auditory learners and the kinesthetic learners at least have the brain picture, and their learning hasn't really started yet because they learn differently. So we show it first. And then what we do is then we break it down like a coaching call, whether we're doing it in person for the technique or remotely, or we're doing a video. We have to explain what the student just saw. And that's going to get the other third of your group that has to learn by auditorily. So we show it to them first, then we break it down and we explain it. Now we're going to have to demonstrate it in the context that it's going to be applied. Because, I mean, you've been in martial arts for a whole lot longer than I have, and you can choreograph anything to be successful. But if a technique can't be done in real time, if it can't be done, if I'm going to teach you a technique, it must be able to be done while you're standing on the ground, sitting in a chair. We don't get to pick our environments where our attacks occur. So you don't get to pick exactly how this is going to take place. So why teach a technique for each individual thing, which is 10 techniques, or you could teach one thing that would be applicable in 10 environments. So it's just a model that we follow, show it, explain it, then demonstrate it in context. And then you have to go through some guided discovery. So the student's in an awkward stage. So whether we do it on purpose or we do it remotely, people's mindsets are different at home than they are when they drive to your school. We find this whether you're in a military setting, a government setting, a state setting, or a local setting, that you're more comfortable in your home, there's more distractions. So you have to set the tone very early on. And you do that by showing them what they're going to learn, explaining it, demonstrating it, and then you have to go through some shadow drills. We call that shadow training, while you're sitting in the chair. We want to make sure that when the student stands up and moves the chair, they're doing things from a more cognitive level. If you know, how many times have instructors or trainers told the student, do you see what I'm saying? But they never showed them what they wanted them to see.
Right.
And I found this out in my early ages, you know, many years ago, that they were doing what I was doing, but what I was saying was opposite of what I was doing. So this allows you to put your training in a different context. Show, explain, and demonstrate, then do some shadow drills, and then you have to practice, because nothing beats practice. And it's not repetition is the teacher, it's supervised practice. So when you're doing it remotely, you know, I'm sure you've heard the ratios before. When you're in a classroom, it's 1 in 10 students. But when you're doing remotely, I have an assistant instructor watching the monitor for every 4 to 6 students. And we're giving constant feedback, because without feedback, they just repeat what they're doing wrong. And this brings me to a very age-old question. You know, if anyone has the answer, I'd like you to type it out to us. Let us know your answer that you found is, how do you train a student to go up against an unknown attacker at an unknown location, at an unknown date and time, with an unknown skill level, and you don't know when how do you prepare a student to do that? Well, as our training has evolved, we feel we found an answer that we can live with, because let's face it, anything you train, they have to be able to do, they have to be able to see it in their mind, they have to be able to feel it in their heart, and they have to be able to perform it with their bodies. And I think when you do that and make the training relevant, your students connect much quicker that way.
Sure. I think that's great. And I think, you know, one of the things, Dave, I love the way that your approach is, I feel very much like your approach is rubber meets the road, right? It's not all theoretical. There's a lot of practical in there. And I really respect that. You know, one of the things that you probably don't, it's probably something that you say in passing, but probably you don't realize. You know, one of the things that was really interesting and life-changing for me, I consider myself to be a good parent, is when I had taken one of the courses with you, I have four boys, and 2 of them happened to be very young. So they were even younger when we took the class. And you dramatically changed the way I interact with them at the park. Because one of the things you had said in talking about situational awareness is about that parent who comes and sits in that one spot and stays there the entire time watching your kids. But then you set yourself up for some, evildoer to be able to set themselves up in a way where they're reacting in relationship to where you're sitting. And from the day that we took that course, There was never a time that I ever went to the park with my kids that I didn't move my position probably every 10 minutes that I was with them, always in hearing in my mind the conversations that we had about those types of things. So really a lot of really good practical stuff. And I know a lot of that stuff is in your book, and a lot of that stuff's in the articles, and a lot of that stuff's in the way that you teach.
You know, everyone's heard this phrase before, I'm sure, that experience is what you get 5 minutes after you have it. And the class you're talking about is our anti-child abduction program. And in order to catch a hunter, you have to know how they hunt. So just by changing the mindset when you go out to the store, the bookstore, the grocery store, wherever you're at, playground, that you're entering someone's hunting ground. And that should immediately change your mindset. You know, we tell people, and a lot of people have forgotten, that as soon as you get to the park, take pictures of everybody in the area and just put them in your phone. And then as you sit and you watch your kids play, your kids should interact with you non-verbally, give you thumbs up, a smile, hello, and they should let you know when they're going to the next thing. You know, people who are there to hunt your children are there to watch you get distracted. They're not in a time zone. They're going to wait. They're going to watch what parent is paying more attention to their cell phone or their book or the food they brought than the most prized possession of their kids playing in the playground. And they wait for us as parents to slip up. So there's many things that you can do. And I think, you know, the internet has been a great resource for people, but it's also been a detriment as well. You know, not everything you see on YouTube or Facebook is true. You know, people get to express, you know, people get to express their opinion like I'm expressing mine. My experience is based off my own truths, my own experiences, my own values, ethics, and morals. And, you know, that might be different than somebody else's. So when we put our training program together, I just want every instructor out there to remember that when you sign their certificate, are you really increasing their insurance deductible? Or are you signing their death certificate? We have a great responsibility that I'm seeing school owners really change that hat a little bit, you know, working with Master Ed Park, Master Chan Lee, Master Jay Lee in Colorado, Master Jim Nam. I mean, I can name, and Master Angie Lee and Jason Lee in Seattle. I can name literally hundreds of school owners that are really making that change going into the new year, because you have to touch your students remotely now. Now, the good thing is you could touch more people remotely than you can have people come into your school. So every week you should be doing a safety podcast, whether you get with people like myself, whether you talk with other school owners. But until a person gets a piece of information, which I call the learning seed, once they get the learning seed, then you have to plant it. Then you have to water it, you have to nurture it, you have to watch it grow, because that's the unique bond between a student and an instructor. And if the instructor understands their responsibility, I can assure you the students know theirs. How many school owners have you seen where the student come back after high school or college or a job and he remembered the impact that you have in their lives? And we're in the business of shaping young minds. And that means emotionally, mentally, and physically. And you have a better way of doing that now through remote training, as well as coming into the school. So you asked me a question earlier. I kind of gave an answer, but didn't. Our workload is almost tripled.
Wow.
I don't have to travel 40, 45 weeks a year, but I can do up to 25 courses in a month, 30 courses in a month, just for me. And if I have 35, 40 trainers out there times that, you can almost do almost 100 courses every quarter. You know, so you have the capabilities for learning how to present your material differently. You'll never present the same amount of material in the same amount of time remotely as you do in person. And you just have to make that change. I think the school owners can do it. They can be very successful at it. And there's a lot of resources out there for them to use, like, you know, Taekwondo Life Magazine is a great resource to do as well.
Great. Let's go. I have a couple of questions. There's so much I want to talk to you about. We talk a lot, but this is a sort of a little bit of a different ability to pick your brain. One is, what is you've been working with the Taekwondo community fairly extensively for a number of years now. What do you see as the differences between working with the Taekwondo community as opposed to working with law enforcement, government officials, things of that nature, in terms of what they bring to the table and the type of program that you do in terms of your training?
Well, I think the role of a student has really never changed. Whether you're the mechanic that goes to work 40 hours a week and then comes to a school 2 hours a day, you know, for the 6-week period, I start to see that a lot of people that come to our classes in the martial art communities are coming from a very heartfelt place, that they understand the world is not as safe as it used to be, and they're more likely to run into danger. They like to have some arrows in their quiver or tools in their toolbox to address it, especially when they're with their families, right? When you train law enforcement, military, and security, their mindset is just like that, but they bring a lot of life experiences from mistakes they've had, situations they've responded to, things that worked out well, things that worked out didn't well, and they quickly want to compare what you're showing them to what has happened to them in the past. So the intensity level is different, but it still comes from the same heartfelt place. I've seen a big difference between working with Taekwondo communities versus working with karate communities or Muay Thai or Krav. Even though they're great martial art styles, Taekwondo has always been more of a family base, or at least that's my personal experience that I have had, that when you go to a Taekwondo school, there's more family. The kids start out young. The kids usually are the testing grounds, and then the parents get involved. And then
Yeah, that's
before
true.
you know it, then you have the whole family doing it. It's something that you can do together as a family, where you're building everybody up, and there's nobody really, tearing anybody down. Not that they tear anybody down in the other disciplines. But when I teach a school on anti-child abduction, that parent's coming because of something they saw in the news, something their child has reported to them, something they want to prevent, and they're coming with a need for wanting to know that information. When I teach a firearms class, anyone who comes to firearms classes are either been in gunfights, could have been in gunfights, had people shoot at them, they might have had to shoot at others. So the training has to be relevant, and you have to make it impactful. So if the student can't relive that life experience in training, then that training really didn't do what it was designed to do. Because isn't the definition of training is to prepare you for what you know is about to occur, and also give you some tools in your toolbox for things that may not happen? So I think the mindsets are the same because they want to learn, but they each bring a different relevant value of information, of experiences to those classes, which change the questions, the intensity, the tone, the tempo of the material. And then the material takes a different life for them.
That's great. That's very helpful. I wanted to ask you, one of the things that's come to mind as I was thinking about us talking is, without getting too far into what's going on in the world, because there's a lot going on in the world, but the term de-escalation has, particularly as it relates to law enforcement and law enforcement situations and violent situations, de-escalation has been a term that has been, I've probably heard it more in the last 30 days than I've heard it my entire life, but it's something that we talk a lot about. And it's something we talk about in Taekwondo schools, in the sense that I think sometimes from the outside, people have the wrong understanding, and maybe people get into martial arts and training and fighting and things for the purposes of learning to defend yourself and learning to fight. But to some degree, the one thing you come to understand when your brain develops is that you never know what you're going to come up against, and probably the greatest tool, right, is de-escalation. So I wanted to get a sense from your perspective in terms of just about that topic, and about how you see that as it relates to the people that you're training in terms of Taekwondo schools and things of that nature. Is that something that you found in and outside of that people are receptive to understanding? Is that still, since the last time we met, something that you consider to be a significant aspect of what it is that you talk about?
Well, yes, de-escalation is not new, but the framework that people need to understand is, before de-escalation is a strategy called non-escalation. All the things you can do to avoid the negative dance, get away from the negative dance, escape from the negative dance, all the things you can do in the front end, when the person's tone of voice increases, when their eyes change, when the 5 basic indicators start to develop, you lose the ability of managing distance, positioning, hand placement, all those things. There's a whole bunch of things before de-escalation that need to be in the fabric of what everybody teaches. The old myth, or the old Mr. Miyagi, from the Mr. Miyagi days.
Sure.
What's the best way to block a punch? Well, it's to not be there. So, your training has to have some non-escalation strategies. And then it has to have de-escalation strategies on what you're managing. Can you manage your tone of voice, your facial expressions? We refer to a tactic called communication alignment. That means when you're talking to someone, is your facial expressions, your nonverbals, your posture, your hands. Are your nonverbals, are they sending the message that your words are trying to say? You've often heard people say, well, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Well, people learn based on what they see. They're more, during times of crisis and stress, people are more educated during visually than auditorily stimulated. So
Right.
if your viewers out there are watching this with me, I'd like you to do this activity. Give me thumbs up. And what I want you to do is I want you to take your thumb and put it right here on your chin. Put it on your chin. There you go. Now I said put it on your chin, and people did what they saw, right?
It's great.
So when when you look
paying
at that,
attention.
that's right. What are you showing the person when you're speaking? Are you showing that you're a threat? You're intimidating, you're mad, you're angry, you're frustrated. Are you giving them things that they can use against you before the first word is spoken? So non-escalation is real important. And communication alignment is managing your nonverbals is just as important as your tone of voice. Because then when you speak, the second part of communication alignment is the tone you use. We always say that the tone you use is the music your words dance to. You know, I can remember when I was young and my mother would stand out on the steps and she'd yell my name, but I wouldn't hear her. I would just see her standing on the porch with the wooden spoon, and I knew nothing good was going to happen when I got to the house, right? The non-verbal cues, right? So tone of voice, if she didn't have that, you is it urgent? Is it an emergency for you or for them? Are you angry? Are you not even concerned for them? So tone of voice is going to actually help you demonstrate concern when you're talking to a person. And then the last part is the words. Precision word choice is something we have to be accountable for. You know, if I say, hey man, don't effing talk to me like that, you know, communication alignment's off. My word choice could have been better. You know, I could have said something like, I can see you're upset, but there's got to be another way you can explain that to me. You know, I have my kids here. I really don't appreciate you, you know, using that language. I want to make sure I'm looking professional, right? I'm demonstrating concern, and I'm keeping everybody safe in the process. So non-escalation is a step. It's not the whole ladder. You have non-escalation, de-escalation, and then the person's either going to take you in conflict and you're going to bring them down. They're going to escalate to crisis. You're going to have to bring them down, or there's going to be a safety violation. You're going to be in combat. They're going to grab you, kick you, spit at you, punch you, attack you. So we identify with what we call the 6 C's of conflict management. And over here to this column, we have context, contact, and closure. You know, you brought up a really interesting concept I want to elaborate just a little bit on. Most of our context stays in the blue. We understand the context, we make the contact, and we have closure. So can we say that most of the contact we make on a regular basis stays in the blue most of the time? That's our goal. But every now and then when we're in conflict, we have the column here, but we also have a column going this way. We have conflict. How many people do we come in contact with every day that it's our tone of voice that escalated the contact? We brought conflict. You know, there's always someone we work with that as soon as they come, they bring their partner of conflict with them. You know, we always hope they don't ever show up, right? So it's what they say, how they say it, what they do, how they do it. But then if you can non-escalate conflict, then you've resolved it. You bring it back to closure. But if you can't resolve conflict, it escalates to crisis. That affects a person's ability to process, to hear things, to see things, to understand things, their emotion. We always tell people never let your personal face enter a professional setting, because your personal face will never represent you well. Right. And that's when people react to things rather than respond to it, which should be a trained sequence. So we have the column on the left, context, contact, and closure, but then it escalates to conflict, escalates to crisis, and then we have combat. Well, before that punch was thrown, there were words that were spoken, or maybe there was a translation of those words that was not meant the way it was meaning to be. How many times have you found during conversations with your kids that your tone never gave the best representation of yourself?
Sure.
And when you're in crisis, adults respond to tone. Hey, don't talk to me like that. You can't say that to me that way. I dare you talk to me like that. And kids, they respond to tone of voice. The old joke in my house was when my kids had friends over and they were all playing, and I'd say, hey, Michael, go get your brother David. And Michael's friends would say, gosh, your dad's pretty cool. And they go, no, my dad's mad. It just, the softer you speak, get your point across a whole lot more. So when I have somebody yelling at me, we use a tactic called reverse yelling. When they're screaming, I can't believe this, it's taken 45 minutes for you to get here. So I really see you're upset. I'd be upset too. And we just don't feed the fire.
Sure.
So that's part of a non-escalation and a de-escalation tactic. So if they're teaching self-defense at their school, and they're only teaching when to block the punch and sweep the leg and put the person in an arm bar, they're teaching them how to get into trouble and then teaching them how to get out of it, when they should be teaching them non-escalation first, then de-escalation, and then what to do if you have to engage. And it should be part of a complete program, which is why I wrote that article. I get people asking me 50 times a week, should I go learn from this guy? I always start out with this. Yes, you should learn from everybody, but you have to keep what they're teaching you in context. If they're teaching you how to take a finger and put it through a coconut, that might be great for pina colada parties, but it's not going to be too well for, physical self-defense. Sure. And physical self-defense starts with the words we use, not the hands we apply. And I think you have to have a good balance of your verbalization skills coupled with physical alternatives. And there are some schools making a change. We're working with several of them. But if you're just teaching how to block and punch and kick, you're really not teaching them self-defense.
That's great. Now, for me, one of the things I'm very big on is reading facial expressions. And when I'm with my kids a lot, one of the things they always used to ask me, do you know that person? Because I always say hello and good morning. And one of the things that I always observe is that, you could read people's expressions and people seem to be you say hello, and all of a sudden people's stern face becomes a smile, right? But now, and I feel like you can sort of read people's tone from their face, but now you walk around, right? And the necessity is we walk around like this, which makes it much harder to read people's facial expressions in a public scenario. So from your perspective, what is the compensating factor in doing that? What should we look more for in terms of being able to sense from a person, right? I mean, prior to this pandemic, you saw someone walk into the bank with a mask and you knew you probably were in danger. Now you see somebody walk in without a mask and it's unusual. So what do we look for? Is it the body language? Is it the vibrational stuff? Is it the verbals? What do you look for? Because you can't look, to me, I've always looked to the face first. I've always felt the face tells you a lot about somebody. You do see the eyes, but is that what you should look for?
Yeah, there's like 100 points of nonverbals. And the facial expressions cover around 8 or 10 of them.
Okay.
But you want to watch how fast a person is walking. What's their walking pace? Are they walking directly with a purpose? I mean, if someone's just walking directly at you, they're mad before they even get there, right?
Right.
So it's the speed and the pace in which they're walking. And number 2, it's the distance they stand from you. The person, Joe Lashley, which is one of our trainers, he's an expert in this. He says, I'm going to probably get this wrong, but he says most people talk too loud, stand too close, talk too fast. And if you're experiencing those things in the very beginning, that should tell you that this person has a sense of urgency, which means you need to put your hands up, create a little bit of distance, because they can't punch you if they can't touch you. Right? So I watch someone's speed of walk. Are they doing a direct line or an indirect line? I watch their head. Is it up and looking, or is it down and slouching? Are their hands fidgety? Are they playing with their ring, adjusting their watch? Or their hands keep going in and out of their pockets? Do their hands keep adjusting a certain spot on their belt? People always give away that they're carrying a firearm in the first 60 seconds of watching them because they're subconsciously touch it, adjust their belt. So I watch how fast they walk. I watch where they're walking, their head positioning, their body slouching, their hand movements, all those nonverbals, how close they stand. If they stand too far away from me, that tells me that they're scared. And then when I look at their face, I look at the eyes. Eyes are very expressive. When someone is yelling at you, you are not smiling with your eyes. You're not.
right.
No, it's more like this. So you have to be expressive with your eyes, more so. When I'm looking at someone, talking with someone, I have to be more animated. I almost have to, a professional performs their words. So their hands are here. They're really, so if you can't see the face, it's, wow, I can't believe that. That's really good. And when you're wearing a mask, they have a tendency to talk louder so their tone of voice is often misread. School ownership practice, the commands they give when they're in the mask, how they're talking to parents. Also, turning your head a little bit to the right or left when you're talking to them, so it's not being mumbled right to them, but they get to hear the words project. They get a better clarity of what you're saying. Talk in shorter sentences. When we do our podcasts and our Zoom calls with my teammates, we always say you have a 3-minute soundbite. At the end of the 3 minutes, shut up so people can digest, ask questions. Right. Well, we say talk to the person for a minute, and before you get done speaking, ask a question, then be quiet long enough to listen. Learn how to communicate when people are in crisis. And if they're wearing a mask, they're scared. They have to be. There's a certain level of anxiety through uneducation. And then they become fearful because they don't know. And then people could panic at the very slightest, bit of something out of the norm. So your nonverbal cues, a person speaks volumes really before the first word is spoken. So, the facial expression is one, but head positioning, body slouching, your nonverbals, it encompasses all that.
That's great. That's great. In the interest of time, I'm going to ask you a couple of more questions. One is I wanted to ask you, you spent your life in law enforcement and in the Marines, and you're around, while you're still involved in that, you're involved with Taekwondo. A lot of what you're doing with Taekwondo is through traditional Taekwondo schools, right? They're more progressive now, but they're still traditional. What do you see as the similarity between the structure of the Marines and the military and the structure that you see in Taekwondo schools today in the United States? Is there a similarity or not really?
Oh, there's a similarity among any culture. There's always a higher tier, a middle tier, then the lower tier. So I'll just give you this example, and then everyone can draw their own conclusions. I've seen some seniors in martial arts feel that their juniors owe them. In the military setting, when I walk into a barracks and I walk in with my ribbons and badges and jump wings, I'll ask a person if I can get them a cup of coffee. But I don't see that. I see some school owners find the line where there's respect, and respect is always shown first, right? So I think there's a chain of command structure that is very similar. There's a master at a school, which is given the utmost respect as he should. It's displayed by his juniors or her juniors. And then the students, mimic that. And if you have a problem with respecting your school, it doesn't start with the students. It starts with the instructors that are modeling the respect that they want their students to have. And I see that is a very good similarity because, we have this old saying, there was a bunch of articles written on a bunch of different topics, like, why is the barracks dirty? You have one set of barracks, which is dirty all the time. You have another barracks, which is immaculately clean. Take the supervisors out of one barracks and put them in the other, and the supervisors in one barracks and put them in the other one. Within 3 weeks, they're reversed.
Right.
So if your dojan is dirty, who wants the dojan to be dirty? And it's
right.
Usually the instructors. Students mirror, they replicate, they imitate. And sometimes flattery, imitation or copying is the highest form of flattery, but can also be the detriment as well. So I think the chain of command, the structure, the respect, the discipline, I think, wow, the martial arts schools are, I see it makes my heart feel good when they have the kids say the Pledge of Allegiance. They have them bow and show everybody with respect, because respect isn't color coded. A person gets respect whether they're treating me with respect or not. That's the hard part, right? How many times have you had people say, well, Mark, I can't treat him with respect. He's not giving me any. Well, it's not like a coin. We treat people like ladies and gentlemen, not because they are, but because we are. That's one of our infographics in our training. And it's hard to treat people right when they're working so hard to treat you so poorly. And I think that's what the martial arts has done a great job in disciplining, like the military does in general, is we treat people the same across the board. When you put on that uniform, there is no color, right? There is no ethnic barrier. There is no financial. You look just like everybody else, right?
That's a wonderful point, and that is one of the things that I've always loved about being in the martial arts, is that you don't know when you put on the uniform. you know, in an ideal environment, how hard someone is willing to work and how good a partner they are. I don't know at first, are you a doctor? Are you a lawyer? Are you a construction worker? Are you Christian? Are you a Muslim? Are you, you know, are you single? Are you married? You don't know any of those things, and those things don't become the basis for which you form any type of judgment. You simply know this is a person who's a good partner to work with, and a person who you can tell gives 150%.
Yeah.
We're all the same, and that becomes the basis for a really. It's always been a safe space. I've always found that being in the dojang is a safe space because of that level of mentality and that level of respect. So that makes sense.
And Mark, I just got to add this one thing. I've seen the school owners that I've worked with have the biggest hearts.
Sure.
They open up their home, their school, their family. They are a true asset to any community. And I've always said that the martial arts schools should work on being a safety resource for their community. Because if they just look at a martial arts school as someone who's teaching kicking and punching, they've missed the whole message of life.
Absolutely.
And I think they should do more to get out in the communities because they're needed in the communities.
At this time, especially, I agree. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think I've seen an amazing, I did a program on this a couple of weeks ago, and I've seen just an amazing when I say transformation, transformation in the way that they're delivering, but that they've all gotten so involved in trying to disseminate good information, to try to be good resources for the community. And it's really, really reinforced what I sort of knew and already knew, but you know, challenging times tell you a lot about who you are and who you're surrounding yourself with. So
I had a parent contact me a while back. We teach active shooter programs to the schools, and there was an active shooter in their school. And
wow.
She was so proud of her 13-year-old daughter that organized and choreographed everything because the teacher was a little scared, not knowing what to do. The students were panicking. She got everybody lined up, ready to go. And, you know, to inspire our young to stand up and be leaders, it makes my heart grow even more when I walk into a school and I see a junior belt helping a senior belt with a poomsae or a kick.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
You watch that camaraderie, you cannot get that. And that's the way our community should be, is so equal. And that's what the martial arts schools, especially the Taekwondo schools I've worked with, have shown me.
That's great. In the interest of time, I'm going to ask you one or two more things, but what do you envision the world for you as we sort of come out of this crisis, right? So there are certain things that have occurred. As you said, there's been transformations in the way you deliver your programs that are not simply going to fold up. There are certain things that are going to fold up, but there are certain things that aren't. What do you, and again, we don't know when ultimately that, you know, life will be whatever normal is. They keep using the term new normal. What do you envision for your relationship and your teaching and your programs in the post-COVID era? Will it be some mix of what you did before and what you're doing now? Will it stay largely this way? What's your thought on it?
Well, you know, the definition of normal is what you allow yourself to get used to, right?
Right.
So we're having to adapt a lot. We've always had blended learning, go to an online course, and then we'll come in for shorter days. Now we have remote training led by instructors, so we can have pretty much everything up to the practice and in the real life simulations. So what I think is going to happen moving forward, we're already seeing this, is that we have a licensed content program where people can buy our content. We train their staff, we give them the material so they can teach it the way they want to teach it. I see me doing more traveling once the travel restrictions are lifted, but I'm not traveling because the travel restrictions are bad. We just want to reduce the amount of instructors that are going to catch the virus, because it's not a question of if you're going to catch it. Everyone's going to get it at some point.
Sure.
Whether you're going to church, you're working out at your own gym, you're going to the grocery store. So I think the normal platform we're going to use is we're going to touch more school owners, more organizations, because we're in healthcare, education, we're in all kinds of school platforms, security, casinos, healthcare, utilities, customer service base. We're going to do a lot of instructor-led training, and that's going to be done remotely. And then at a certain point, instead of 5 days, you'll get together for 2 days or a day based on what you're learning. I don't think you'll ever truly remove the face-to-face training that's needed for competency, but the student has to take a greater burden of responsibility now than they did before, because you have to practice.
Right.
And practice without training is a fool's bet. So if you're taking a class online and you're taking a cooking class and you miss the ingredients, you throw it out and do it again. But if your teachers are giving you something to learn, we say that you should be practicing. So the ratio is for every 4-hour block we give you online, that demands 2 hours of practice. And you're going to have to practice and do it right with supervision. So remote is going to be done more with instructor-led classes. I see me meeting with more school owners in this platform, going over our training, taking an on-demand online course, taking the instructor-led class, and then at some point getting together to validate your skill set. Because that's really what the in-person training does, is at some point you have to perform your skill set.
Right.
And so this gives us a bigger venue. There's going to be more instructor-led classes, more webinars, more podcasts, more workshops done remotely. And then we'll get back together with the schedule, finances, and all those things come to play, because let's face it, this is taking a toll on everybody financially.
Sure.
And training professionally is the first thing that's cut from big organizations, but it's the number one reason they're having the lawsuit in the first place. So I think they're going to have to find the balance of, how do I get my staff trained? And then what demands of practice do I put on them? Because at some point you have to be able to perform what you're learning. So, I don't know if that answered your question specifically.
No, it did. It's great. And you hit on a good point that I think is it's a chicken and egg, but I think you're right. In any type of business, no matter what it is, that financial needs always reduce the amount of training. But if one were to analyze the economic impact of loss, of accident, of in anything, of mistakes that occur as a result of diminished training, it probably more than compensates for what the cost of any type of training would be in almost anything that you do. So
I get a call from, Mark, I get a call from a big organization. We're having a lawsuit because this employee said this. My first question is, well, what were they told to say in lieu of that?
Right.
So you can't be shocked on what comes out of their mouth, right? If you don't teach them.
Right, because that vacuum is filled by something. It's filled by whatever, bad things they might have come in with. So, Dave, for us, obviously people can look for all of your articles in our magazine. They can go to our website, taekwondolifemagazine.com, to order the print and digital issue, the Dave Young issue, which I'm really proud of. It's a combination. Your publisher was kind enough to allow us to republish one of the chapters of your great book.
Oh, wow.
And so that's included in there. They have given us permission to do that, plus some of your articles. They can find your great book on Amazon. Tell us where else people that are interested in learning more from you and about you, what is the best way for them to get in touch with you, whether they be federal, state, Taekwondo school, Muay Thai school?
Sure. You can get a hold of me. My email address is D for David, Young, Y-O-U-N-G, D Young @Vistelar, VISTELAR.com. Or you can go to the usfightingsystems.com website and click on how to contact Dave there.
Terrific. And we'll put those links in the show notes.
When we wrote the book, we wrote 10 chapters, and in every chapter there's an activity to do with your family. We wanted the book to be interactive, and that really inspired the way we wrote the articles. We got some really good articles planned for this year coming up and next year, and how we tie the COVID-19 remote training.
That's great.
And, Mark, every martial artist that I talk to in the country, whether it's on Facebook or in person or on the phone, they always mention what a good resource your magazine has been. So, thank you.
It has been the mission of Grandmaster Park. It's been my mission. So it really has been terrific. Let me ask you the final question I'm going to ask you. I'm just curious. Who is the ideal student for you and your organization?
The one who understands that what they're going to learn is going to determine the life factor. So when your life depends on it the most, those are the students I want, because they keep the training relevant. There's a difference between being paranoid and being cautious. Cautious people are aware. Panic people have no clue. And if you live in the world that it can happen to you, I believe there's some really good things we can share with you, but you have to be the deciding factor. I'm always willing to do, talks with school owners on the phone. They can get a hold of me through ASA, the American Sub-Nim
Sure.
Association. Master Chan Lee is always a great connection. Master
He was
Jay
a great
Lee.
guest. Yeah, was a great guest on this program. His episode probably one of the top 5 most listened to of all of our shows.
And I have no doubt that's true. They are amazing individuals. And the best student is the one that comes with an empty cup. It's probably the best answer.
That's great. That's great. Well, Dave, I thank you for talking to us. I will say honestly and personally that your interaction with you has changed my life for the better. There are certain watermarks, but especially when you get older, certain watermarks in your life, certainly being with the parks for as long as I have, but having the relationship with you, your contributions, the knowledge that I've gained, I feel bad. I feel like it's very, I kind of suck you dry when I have the opportunity to speak to you, but I really learned so much. So I thank you so much for talking to us, and I look forward to it. And I wish you and your family safety and health in the upcoming remainder of the year and forward. And thank you so much. And when we publish this, we'll put in the show notes all the ways to get in touch with you, all the ways to order the various products. And I look forward to seeing you around and talking to you very soon.
Same here. And let's just keep everybody safe out there together, because we definitely need it.
Very good. Thanks, Dave.